everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Ashley, and I am with Financial Narrative. Today, we are very privileged to talk to Christina Twomey and Susan Thomas about the talent crisis, which I know many of you have had more than a few experiences with in recent months. So quickly, Christina works for S&P Global Ratings. She has over 15 years of comms experience, both in financial services and the energy sectors. And she has spent her career growing and leading successful teams. For the past 10 years, she's been part of S&P's Global Comms team. She is now the Vice President of Global Comms for S&P Global Ratings and also the Global Head of Comms for S&P Global Sustainable1. So lots on Christina's plate. Thank you for joining us today, Christina. And Christina will be chatting with Susan Thomas. She has a background in the finance industry. She also has over 20 years of experience in executive search. She's a client partner at Heyman Associates. I know many of you are familiar with Heyman Associates, one of the top names in executive search, especially in the financial comms industry. And Susan and her colleagues at Heyman focus on placing top-level candidates, both domestically and internationally. So as we jump into our event today, please do feel free to enter any questions you have into the chat. I will be taking those and passing them over to both Christina and Susan throughout the event, and we'll have a little bit of time for Q&A at the end. So with that, Christina, I will hand it over to you.
Thanks so much, Ashley. It's great to be here. I really appreciate the invitation to meet with everybody today, and especially to have this conversation with you, Susan. Welcome.
Thank you.
So I think we can all agree the job market has gone crazy in the last however many months. You can tell us from what I think many of us have seen. It appeared that folks were kind of bedded down a bit through the height of the pandemic, maybe last year, and as things are starting to ease. I know I'm feeling it firsthand and seeing it firsthand. This is a job seekers market. We're seeing loads and loads of opportunities coming through, a lot of turnover, and we're hearing things about, the great resignation. So maybe if you could start by helping us make sense of what we're seeing, what you're seeing across financial communications specifically.
Yeah, sure. So to your first point, when, I think for us, the beginning of the year, so we don't just focus on financial services, and the beginning of the year was crazy busy. It was as if everybody had been waiting to see what would happen, and then suddenly everybody wanted to go to search. We had not really seen anything quite like it. And then it eased off, I'd say, over about 3 weeks in the summer, and then started again. Although it feels as if it's calmed down just a little bit, but ironically, what I would say is that specifically for financial services now we're seeing it's very busy. So while it was across the board at the beginning of the year, it's as if financial services, and I feel as if this is a little bit of a trend for financial services, is sort of catching up now. So while a leader in some areas, not necessarily on the hiring front, and certainly not specifically for communications professionals. So I would say that's the first thing in terms of sort of timing. So super busy, yes, absolutely, as a candidates market. So I always think that some little examples are really useful, is in particular for people to take back to their institutions to say, well, I'm hearing and seeing this, I heard this from, a search firm. But we're seeing, for example, that it can be that people are moving actually for as much as double their compensation, which is, that's an exception. But it's not one individual, it's several individuals. So specific examples of that might be people who are coming from agency, who have been underpaid to market compared to individuals who are already in financial services. But it's not just that, it's across different financial services institutions. And as you all would very well know, this will be, what are the pockets of those institutions? How programmatic are their compensation structures? How much can they move from, an original idea of an offer to something quite different once they're educated in the market? So the problems we have seen are those institutions who are just absolutely clueless about where the market is in the first place and come to us saying, we want this individual at this compensation level. And we try to educate and say that will not happen, or if it will take us a really long time, and you're not going to be sort of candidly, you're not going to be blown away by the talent you're seeing, versus an institution that comes where, and I'll go straight to what one of the differences is, the edges that an organization can have. If their HR, their talent acquisition department, is really good at knowing what is truly market versus what the compensation agencies will tell you is market, then those individuals will educate both the communications professionals and HR and leadership, and keep telling everybody, you won't get the talent you want at this level. The search firms are right, and so you need to start looking at a different level. Now, if they then come with a very different range, then usually the client will be absolutely surprised and delighted by the extraordinary level of talent that they can attract. But there needs to be more than that. I would say that the next trend, and we could go deeply on any of these trends, I think, the next trend is, what is this institution doing now? And this maybe is a little bit more of a struggle for financial institutions, but not just financial institutions. I'd say it may be professional services across the board. How easily are they talking about purpose and mission? When you think about it, these are institutions that in general are serving many, many, many corporations, not just corporations, governments, etc. And so then to speak about mission is really difficult. You've got so many audiences listening to what you're saying. How do you declare that purpose and mission in the midst of all of that? And ironically, here you are trying to recruit corporate communications professionals into the very area that is responsible for that. So it has become the case, I think, not just at the junior level, but it's pronounced at the junior level, that there is tremendous focus on what are you doing in DE&I, what are you doing in ESG, what's your sustainability policy, what's going on in CSR. Beyond that, and then obviously what's happening around COVID, do you have remote working, don't you have remote working? And then I would say there are three other areas that the organizations are having to look at: disinformation, digitization, AI ethics. So I think those are probably the main things. What's happening in the compensation area, and then what's the institution doing? What is leadership declaring about the institution that makes that institution attractive to go to? I'm trying to think what else we're seeing as sort of major trends. I think those are the main ones, really.
Yeah, well, loads to unpack there. Let's go back a few steps. High level, validating you're seeing this heightened demand. It's a job seekers market. Do you have a sense from your clients what's creating this demand, this war for talent? Why now? Why are so many of these perhaps financial services companies and companies at large almost kind of waking up to the value that communications professionals provide? What's changing there? And can you help us dig in a little bit on what sort of roles specifically across financial communications appear to be the most in demand now? Is there any rhyme or reason there?
Yes, absolutely. And I think some of that is the things that I've just pointed to, that candidates are looking for in institutions. Institutions have had to wake up over the last couple of years in particular to all of those things I just listed, to DE&I, to ESG, sustainability, CSR, etc., disinformation, managing COVID. All of that will point to several areas of expertise that are needed. So first of all, that area, if you think about corporate communications inside of any institution, if the institution is not large enough or developed enough to have those areas as separate functions, all of those areas will fall to corporate communications. So what an institution can't manage independently, they'll look to their corporate communications functions to say, you need to talk about this, you need to manage this. And I think that has made, that's the area where financial institutions was not as progressed, if you like. I think then, if you look at those actual areas, that will tell you that you're going to need really good media relations, you're going to need really good writers, you're going to need thought leadership, you're going to need really good internal communications as well. And then I would say that there is sort of a different level of external impact communications. Really, it's about looking at your audiences, understanding all of your audiences, including your internal audience. Who are all of your owners, stakeholders, influence, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. And then so taking that next step further, as we kind of flip the vantage point, what can those same leaders do to attract and maybe even more so retain top talent for the teams? What are you seeing there? I'm mindful, that companies are really stepping up both in their recruitment efforts, as we were just talking through, but also in keeping their top talent.
Yeah.
How is that dynamic coming into play with the work that you're doing with clients and with recruits?
Yeah, it's really interesting. The next conversation I'm going to be having with a group of people, before the end of the year, is actually going to be talking to one institution's corporate communications function about how all of them can think about their careers. So the idea being that if you invest in your team members, that yes, you might be training them, developing them, getting them to think about their futures in a way that might lead them to leave. But better be doing that and having a super reputation and being a great group to work for, and having them feeling that they have an extraordinary leader and mentor, than to leave them floundering and them not really be developing even within your own group. So I think investment, it's investment in each individual, but also then the next thing would be investment in how that group of individuals works together, such that they develop a sense of the power of the team that they are, and then hopefully stay inclined to be in that. The next thing is that, as a leader of a group, you've got to be working out how you advocate for that team in terms of compensation. So one of the things we don't ever, people phone us for lots of sorts of advice, and one of the things we don't necessarily hear is people, for example, a leader of a group, unless they're actually already at hiring, saying, I'm about to go into compensation conversations, can you give me an idea of the market for everybody in my team? So that seems to me something that it would be really good to do, is to be really advocating for the value of your team. Now, the other way in which I think that communications leaders can be advocating for their team, if they're lucky enough, is through analytics, is to be able to demonstrate in real numbers, in C-suite talk, if you like, although one hopes that the C-suite talk is changing from just numbers to other things. But I think if you have the benefit of demonstrating the power of corporate communication, so to some extent this is already happening, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? But it still can be accelerated. This has been happening for marketing forever. And corporate communications have not been grandstanding the degree to which they can actually cause an extraordinary shift in market cap. If you demonstrate that, my argument is you demonstrate that the salaries should be commensurate with that shift in value.
Absolutely. And are there any examples where you've seen or heard of that being really successfully done? Anything that you could share that stands out with regard to advice around how to shift from perhaps more of the qualitative, softer reporting out and more of the metrics that truly speak to real bottom line ROI? I'll pause and say part of it for me is when I think about how we tell our stories, we think about, of course, advancing the brand, advancing our share of voice in meaningful ways tied to business strategy, but also the value around protecting our business reputation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so we map against those two, kind of, promote, protect.
Yep.
I found oftentimes in how we're able to articulate and wrap data points around the protect bucket, actually that seems to move even more from a compelling standpoint of the support that we get from the C-level.
Right.
So curious to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, I don't have any more sort of really specific examples of that. What I would say that we're seeing is that the institutions that have seen the benefit, as you're describing, it's either that the corporate communications function has seen the benefits of the feedback that they get from analytics themselves. And for example, they might have seen it in one area and seen the extraordinary difference that can make for that one business area, and then declared that essentially what they want to do is have that for every single area the moment that they can. So now you have this, it's really interesting because then if you talk to analytics experts, they'll say, well, we spend so much time just convincing people that there's value in what we do. So everybody is doubting the data. Is it really real? Is that good feedback? And their theory is you go with the best that you get because it's better than nothing, and now act. And that's where you'll see the results, because in acting, you'll get the feedback and that will keep on helping you to develop what really truly is that really pointed approach. But there's two ways of looking at it, right? So there's the degree to which the feedback is giving the corporate communications department itself more value and efficacy, but then there's also the degree to which you take that information and demonstrate value with the department. So I would say it's probably most of the things that we will hear are very similar to what you're hearing. But more than that, it will be about, I think one of the most powerful things I heard was when you think about if you think about a company that's billions of dollars market cap, then actually 1 degree of reputation change, be it, as you're saying, defensive, or it could be $1 billion.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'd love to go back to around what I'm hearing as real purposeful communications, right? Purposeful, purpose-driven comms around such important things like sustainability, DEI, and the like. I almost personally feel like through the pandemic, and from what I've been hearing from other colleagues, it was a real awakening for so many, right? To think about, especially in the realm of financial services or corporate communications. Yeah. Suddenly we were hit with this moment of being faced with time to really stop and think about how we're living our lives in alignment with our values, and look at the companies that that we represent and their values, how they're walking the talk, right? And then see where there's hopefully great alignment or perhaps room for a deepening of that alignment. So I feel like that's probably worth pausing on a little bit as we consider what sorts of things companies can do if perhaps they're not on the cutting edge of some of these trends, of some of these topics. Actually, I hope they're not trends. I hope they're here to stay and then some. But
yeah, no kidding.
What if someone is listening in and they're not currently with an organization that has a DEI strategy or specific goals, or has recruitment partners who are really helping make a strong commitment to inclusion, right? What can we be thinking about in that respect?
Gosh, I mean, if you're saying that, what can a corporate communications function that doesn't have all of that support be doing, then I think you could look at that in two ways. One is you have an extraordinary opportunity to actually be the champion of those things. Use your communication skills to be the part of the organization that actually suggests that all of this is brought. That these are the things that without you won't compete with other organizations for talent. That it will be incredibly difficult, and that you have either then got to pay individuals to come and build it, or within what I mean is you've either got to pay the individuals within corporate communications to start taking those things on. As I was saying at the beginning, if it doesn't exist and it's not of enough value to be a standalone function for the organization, then say that is where that if you have the appetite for it, recommend that you are the department where that starts, so that it's demonstrated. The problem though is, and we did come across this recently, so for a beautiful example, where you have sort of absolutely top talent in an organization, and the organization is paying lip service to DE&I, so wants to join the bandwagon but doesn't actually want to put any real resource, be it financial or other, around a proper DE&I program, and yet they want somebody to own the title. And I think we saw a lot of this before the events of the last few years, and then the events of the last few years have been enough to shake us out of complacency and have numerous leaders say, no, I did really always care about that, I was just a bit busy, and that they will actually say, yes, our profits are super important, but so is this, let's really make this work. And then I think they're also seeing that there's value to this, that this is actually something that's going to help them attract top talent. But I think what you're asking is super difficult, because you're asking, as is often the case, if this doesn't exist anywhere else for the corporate communications team, and if it's small, it's going to be really stretched, because it's going to be trying to wear all of these hats at once. I personally see that as both, something that you could be seeing as a fantastic opportunity And actually, when we talk about career development, there's always this double-edged sword of, do I work for an organization where I'm completely siloed and I don't get to go across any lines? I don't get to develop my career across all of the verticals of communications, in which case I'm not training myself very well to be a future CCO. Or do I work for an organization where I'm wearing so many hats that, I'm literally jack of all trades, master of none? And what you want is a balance somewhere in between. So maybe my actual answer to the question would be either leave if you think that it can't be done, start looking around and make that your reason for looking around. And if you think it can be done, start doing it.
Yeah.
But you've got to find those internal champions, haven't you? And that's probably the first place. Find partners, mentors, people who are going to help you, champion you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then that goes back to your earlier point too, which I thought was so well made, around really the mindset of managers as what I would consider team coaches, right? Really shifting a mindset, if it exists, around a perceived scarcity of resources, and instead think about our people across the teams, if we're managers of people, in terms of how we can help truly support them and grow them in ways that are deeply meaningful to them at an individual level, in good alignment with the business, right? And have it go so far, in all sincerity, that when the time comes for that person to grow to a next level, if that next level isn't able to be present in the current organization, that you wish them well.
Yeah.
Because oh, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, that the structure of your team can support that departure.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a little bit of a leap of faith, I think, for some, because you get used to doing that mindset. What I found and what I've heard from others is that it comes back tenfold, where when you really live that in all sincerity and seek to serve and support, right? Again, I can't stress enough, in alignment with what the business needs first and foremost, of course.
Of course, yeah.
Really elevate people. If and when they leave, sometimes they'll come back, right? Or sometimes they will refer other absolutely brilliant candidates that you never would have connected with otherwise, and they've served as a bit of an endorsement for you.
Yes.
Because they can say, this manager is actually the real deal. This company really lives by these values, right? And that, to me, I think, can make all the difference, especially when we think about job markets like what we're seeing today, which are just so frenetic. Right.
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, if you think about it, who are you going to recommend more freely? Is it the individual who was, we work also in investor relations, and we were working with a young man who was part of a team of a huge company, and he kept describing that his boss had been helping him to design his future career and was giving him very specific experience, literally helping him to develop. And he said, and here is that moment. I said, we actually wanted him to resign and move to the company very, very quickly because they were about to IPO. And when he went to his boss, he said, I get it, you go, we're fine. Because it was the opportunity they both had been working toward. The head, it was the global head of investor relations, and he was as invested in this young man's future as he was his own, and the team could handle his departure. And he was proud. Now, what that means is that, yes, absolutely, the departee is going to recommend to anybody to go and work for this person, because this is somebody with whom you're going to grow, develop, and you won't get stuck. And they will look for other opportunity for you within the organization. I think that's the exception, not the rule. But we do have, I'm happy to say that, just this year we've worked with a number of people who are exactly that way. And yes, so funnily enough, one of the things I was writing down about what's really going to make the difference, it's your reputation, you, the CCO, whatever level you're at, it's your reputation that will help you. People, our candidates will ask us, what is the culture of the organization? We will ask our clients, you're going to have to explain your culture. We're going to have to tell them what your culture is. So your reputation is huge. Who you are, that they are going to come and work with, is going to be a huge part of it, not just the company. And actually, the company could be a nightmare. It could be all over the place and need to be turned around. But if you're a fantastic leader, people will say, my gosh, there's tremendous opportunity there. The best description I've ever heard of a great opportunity where we've been in the market saying this organization has all of these levels in which it needs to improve, is somebody saying, wow, that's a really great job, because that's one of those jobs where even if you fail, you would have learned so much that it really would have been worth it.
Yeah, well said. So, purpose-driven organizations, plans around that, great managers, great leaders who really support true growth and learning, right? Who doesn't want to wake up each day and learn something new, right? I feel like that's what keeps us alive. That's such an important thing so that we don't feel stagnant, and that our teams don't stagnate. What other advice would you give to the leaders here who are trying to add more members to their teams or replace critical roles in this market? I just want to kind of shake you down for all the advice.
Yeah.
What comes to mind?
So it's super difficult. Ashley and I were talking about this and saying, what do you do when truly there is a dearth of talent? Everybody's chasing the same talent. How do you differentiate? And I think that then I've touched a little bit, but perhaps not keenly enough on coordinate internally. Come together with compensation, come together with the talent acquisition team, see if you can get your whoever, if it's you, and if it's not you, then whoever is between you and your C-suite, get a conversation there. If you're using a search firm, for example, let their narrative be that this person, this person, this person, this person are all involved in this search, watching this search. They all think this is really important. So what is the importance of that role that you're recruiting for to the firm? Gather that before. We saw this at the beginning of the year with an extraordinary leader who does a number of things that I think are really admirable. And she has on her team many people who have been there for a really long time, do not want to leave. And the way that they speak about her speaks volumes for what she's done. And she absolutely has the ear of the chairman. I think, frankly, he would probably do whatever she said. So one of the things that she did was she talked to us about, can I find this person at this level? And we said, no, you can't. And so she said, okay, well, in that case, let me think about how I'm going to do this. And we watched her think about it with the HR director in the room. And she said, I think that you have only thought about this role in this way, and I want you to think about it in 3 other ways. And so she explained the ways in which this individual within a programmatic compensation structure was fitting into 4 buckets, not just one. And that therefore she could gather a little bit of compensation for each of those buckets and managed to get, I think, another $150,000 for the search, which at the level that it was at was significant. So that made all the difference. One of the things she said, for example, was as simple as, this person is most likely of the people I see in the group to be my successor. We hadn't got a candidate yet, but she's making a declaration about what needs to happen. So what other declarations can you make about the value of that role? So, for example, what if that person doesn't manage a lot of people? This is key for financial services, corporate communications functions that sometimes are not as large as they are in the corporate world, or even non-profit for that matter. So then if this person's going to wear several hats, well, that's harder than going and being in just one vertical, if you like. So talk about that. Talk about the degree to which you're trying to find somebody who's got several areas of expertise. Talk about, if they don't have a large team, that they are nevertheless an expert somewhere, and that requires somebody who in another area, for example, media relations. So media relations, do I need to have a large global team? Maybe not, no. So I might not have 20 people reporting to me. I might only have 5. But I might be responsible inside a financial institution for talking to every single one of the leaders of the businesses, which in and of themselves are the size of one corporate. Yeah. So then explain that part, get really sort of granular about the value of the individual relative to the many roles that they will play in the organization.
It's really helpful. We have a question in from the audience. Someone would love to go a little bit deeper with you with regard to retention. We've touched on bits and bobs around it. Are you seeing anything else tactically from a retention standpoint that folks on this line, perhaps as hiring managers or team leaders, need to be mindful of? Maybe a bit of a reality check.
Yeah.
What do you see?
I think the first thing we're seeing, so the first thing is, what is your policy around remote working versus in the office. So that's a key at the moment. We are seeing candidates who refuse to go into the office. We're seeing people who want the 3 days a week in the office, 2 days at home written into their contracts. Flexibility there will be key. Others that you could go so deeply on any of these issues. It was talked with another organisation recently that's going to face enormous problems with those people who don't want to be vaccinated. What can you do about that? Who can help you with that? I mean, that's literally, you might have to go and collaborate with facilities about that. That would be the first thing. What are the circumstances of your physical presence in the office? How is that being handled? The next thing is what we've just talked about, I think, which is how do I feel about how I'm being treated in the team? What's the future of my career because of the way I'm treated within my team? So what are you as a leader doing to make sure that this individual, even if someone called them to say, you know, I've got this other magnificent opportunity, felt really comfortable saying, I'm very happy where I am, thank you very much. You know, there's really nothing I need to change. All my boxes are checked. What are those boxes? Find out what they are for each individual. And if those individuals don't know how to think about those things, they'll be vulnerable to moving because they'll look to a move to fix what they don't even know is the situation. So we as human beings are very good at advising others, not so good at helping ourselves in general. So get creative with your team members and start them thinking about, so, you know, I mean, it sounds really trite about sort of don't do the next 5 years, but do a little bit of, you know, sort of how much you're thinking about the future. Because in order to end up in the role you want, some of us will get there by default. It'll all happen beautifully. And others of us maybe not so much, and we need to think about what is that end place. We'll sometimes talk to people about the sort of the arc of their career and the portfolio of the career that they're building without really realizing it. We can see it better than they can, and we might be able to see that if we talk to them about, well, where are you trying to get to? Are you going to stay a specialist, or do you want to go CCO, or do you want to go into something completely different in the end and take these specific skills you've learned into another career entirely? And if they're going to do any of those things, there are specific steps that they can take to develop more towards that. So investing in that way, that's the, you know, listening and then helping. The compensation piece, I think, is key. Don't leave people waiting to find out. Let them know that you're working on that. The other thing that we've seen lately, and I think this is all again about quality of life, is vacation. So we're starting to see organizations talking about vacation, talking about benefits. The United States remains one of the places where, and I know we have listeners from around the world, but in the United States specifically, it's still, we're just going through a situation where 2 of our candidates of 4 happen to be European, and they are horrified that they'll only get the amount of vacation that they'll get. And then if you are dealing with people who are in the years when they're building a family, think really carefully about what your policies are around maternity and paternity leave. Absolutely. Those are the things in the States where people can make a huge difference because it hasn't been done yet. Not generally anyway.
Absolutely. Yeah, it seems that the companies, especially, who are not waiting to see what others are doing, but instead are stepping up to really take the lead. Yeah. Getting the support of their boards, getting the support of the C-suite, and instituting policies that are truly people-friendly, right? Yeah. People first, family-friendly, mindful of meeting folks where they are in their life, you know, as carers, as parents, as children, all of that stuff really stand out.
Yeah. And if you think about it, when people are peaking in their careers, they're also peaking in their responsibilities in the home. There's so much to be said about that we haven't really been very human about, frankly, especially I think, sadly, you know, financial services in particular, there's been such a culture of, you know, how hard can we work, and, you know, that's a badge. So that's going to take a lot but there's great leadership in that regard, I think, at the moment.
Absolutely. And I think also on that note, again, calling back to the height of the pandemic, my goodness, did the rubber meet the road there? You know, if anyone else is a parent, I'll volunteer. The mom of a 6-year-old girl who did Zoom kindergarten from home last year. And my goodness, I think we all deserve medals for surviving, quite frankly. But think about how we continue to keep the best bits of what we learned.
Yes.
forward?
Yes, I really hope. I feel as if we got. There were lots of ways in which we were shaken out of complacency. I just hope that, sadly, human beings have a track record of not really learning very well from lessons. But I'm so hoping that this was enough of a shakedown that we did actually learn.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's switch gears a little bit, because I'm mindful that plenty of folks on this session may not be hiring. I'm sure everybody's mindful of retention, but what about for senior communications leaders, perhaps listening in, who are thinking about their own career moves? What should they be thinking about, and how can they help? How can you help them kind of think through that balance of when they're in a great role, and perhaps if they even have some golden handcuffs, if you will, in the form of stock and other incentives, versus that next big opportunity? What should we be thinking about there?
This is a really difficult one, I think, and this is another area where you could go quite deep. I have a background in ontological coaching as well, which is not the transactional coaching. Is I don't know what to do, tell me what to do. You show somebody what to do, they do it. Ontological coaching is that you keep on getting advice about what to do, but it's not really changing anything. So then, what is it about you as a being that wants to change? And I think that this is another area where we're waking up to our ability to truly reflect, and our ability to truly think and act intentionally, as opposed to just be swept along. So I think the first thing is, again, think co-creatively. Don't try to do this on your own. Find some. We talk to people all the time in exactly this way. In fact, somebody phoned me last year saying, do I want to leave comms altogether? Or do I want to stay? And you might have somebody who's in agency. Do I want to go in-house? Don't I want to do I not want to go? What shall I do next? And the reality is that from where you're standing, that's really difficult to decide. You've sort of got to, when we're children, what we do is we imagine our futures. We imagine who we're going to be, and we don't necessarily end up exactly there. But when you talk to people about what they were thinking they were going to become, so many of the innate skills that they had are being used in the job that they're in. It might not have the title they expected, but they are using the very things that they wanted to use. For comms professionals, so many of those things are the same sorts of things. High levels of curiosity, ideally. As I said, later this month, we're going to be talking about, if you're looking for juniors, what are the skills that you're looking for? And then for seniors, think about what those skills are that you have. Really reflect on how you've grown and what it is that you have most enjoyed about your career. And then I think you've got lots of choices. What's your motivation now? We all are motivated for different reasons at different times and through different circumstances. There may be times in our career where really it has to be about money. That is the most important thing in order for there to be balance in our lives. There will be other times where we can afford to put that one aside and say that it actually is about getting more interest back in what we're doing, or it might be that I can actually give back a little bit. So, for example, I might be able to look at a non-profit role that 10 years ago I couldn't look at. It wouldn't have paid enough, but I could now. So I could take these extraordinary skills. I don't work for free, but I do work at a little bit of a discount to what I was working on before. I would say you could test and train for where you want to go next if you are not already who you want to be in that next part of your career. The other things I think I've touched on, that knowing whether you want to stay in corporate communications, specialize, become a CCO, keep growing in your CCO type role, go beyond that even. There are so many skills that I think more and more corporate communications professionals are realizing that they are one of the most valuable voices and sets of ears in the boardroom, or in a C-suite situation, as a member of the executive team. So where might that take you? I think there are the other things that you've got to think about, I suppose, for senior people. We've had a few people who I feel they've ended up feeling as if they've been boxed. So have you ended up feeling that I'm in financial institutions, or in a financial institution, and I actually really wish that I had got outside of this industry? Or are you in a vertical and you really wish you had got out of that? That's really difficult, but there are ways to do it. it's a longer game for moving out of that area. But there are ways to retrain yourself, repackage yourself, and retell your own narrative to be able to make that move. Does that answer your question, or are there other things specifically?
No, it does. I mean, so with your last mention of making a move, if you feel like you actually want to get out of the swim lane that you've been, feeling boxed into, are you seeing folks who are stepping out of their roles and actually taking a bit of a pay cut or a bit of a horizontal move to enable a different path ahead? What does that look like? Can you give us maybe any examples where that's worked really well?
Yeah, I would say
where it's not a good idea.
Yeah, so there are probably a couple of circumstances where people might make a lateral move, and they might change the structure of their compensation. So, for example, moving out of financial institutions, might mean that you were going to get a different, and the other way is true too, that there might be a different structure of communication, compensation. Could you afford more stock, less cash? Do you need more cash, less stock? And that could give you an opportunity to take something that you have learned that an organization very much wants, and be in an organization that gives you an opportunity to learn something you very much want to learn, that they have in droves, or that they don't, but they want someone who has an appetite to learn. So I think in terms of, what am I bringing, what am I learning? And you spoke a little bit about what makes us happy. So do we want to be more of a master or more of a beginner? What's the balance of that we want in our careers? And what are we prepared to sacrifice for that? These are, it all sounds so sort of simple and self-explanatory, but I just don't think we give ourselves time. I find that in general, that's what's happening when people call us, is that they have thought, I don't know, I'm not quite happy. What am I going to do? I'll call Heyman and see what they have to say. And the reality is that there's some thinking that needs to happen, and it is very difficult to do that on your own. Co-creatively is much better.
Yeah. Any advice, or maybe even some specific resources around how to get help so that you're not trying to do it on your own, right? For someone who's senior level, starting to think, I'm not sure if I want to stay or if I want to go. How can someone get help better seeing their story arch, if you will, and seeing kind of
a really good coach. I really do think the value is extraordinary, and I think that that's improved tremendously as well. I think that there are, and if you know somebody who is just naturally that way, this doesn't have to be, a professional coach, but I do think that that investment in ourselves can pay back so much, and that if you think about it, if you're going to invest in yourself in that way, you're going to become that person for your team as well, whether it's the team that you have at the moment or a team in the future.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Small kind of side topic or question. I have a good friend of mine who's also in the communications industry, very senior. She's looking for a different role, and she went through a resume specialist. How you get these messages on LinkedIn and whatnot, let me redo your resume for you. And it was, she and I were chatting about it, and she found it profoundly helpful.
Yeah.
Because she admitted that as she and her team, she runs this global team, focused on telling other people's stories, crafting messaging, these things, she had not invested any time, anything at all, into telling her own story or getting help telling her own story.
Yeah.
She sat down with a coach or resume, I'm not even sure what to call it, and what she got back kind of left her gobsmacked, because for the first time she saw herself in a completely new lens. And felt instantly motivated and kind of, empowered by that to then have her own talk track. It was almost like she had someone kind of PR her,
Absolutely. It's absolutely right. You're going to see yourself in a different light. You're therefore going to start thinking of yourself in different roles that you didn't think of yourself in before. I tell people you can do the same thing with your LinkedIn. It is very boring, I think, to manage our own LinkedIns. Have somebody else do it for you, for goodness sake. And then in the process of them having to ask you lots of questions about yourself. Years ago, when I was working in financial services search, I had an assistant who would, he insisted on walking candidates to the elevator. He had the luxury to do so, apparently. And they would say that they felt that they had been to the psychotherapist. But what they're really saying is, I haven't talked about myself for that long, for an hour in as long as I can remember. So you need somebody to be sitting and asking you lots of questions about yourself so that you become present to yourself. So this was my point about the reflection. What have you learned? What have you learned that you barely even know you've learned, and that what have you become? Ironically, there's another thing that would really show this up. You can go to these career counselling organisations that will put you through lots and lots of tests to show you what your skills are. I would be a little bit careful of that, though, because essentially what that's going to tell you is what you're good at right now, that it is that you have been doing. So that could be limiting if you're trying to find out what you want next and you don't know. You know that you're very good at your job and it's going very well, but you want something else and you haven't quite worked out what that something else is yet. So there's two things. That's becoming very present to who you are already, and then doing some work on what's missing if something is missing. That's the going a little bit deeper, I think. What are your options that you haven't even realized are your options? So it's a really good example. The LinkedIn example for more junior people who are still sort of bouncing around and want to find different experience. One of the things I will say to them is that you will not be found. So if they're not going to be working through search firms, they're going to be working through in-house recruitment. And in-house recruitment is, at best, quite often it will be individuals who are just trawling through, and they're using Booleans to find you. And so if your LinkedIn doesn't say what you want to do next, it only says what you've been doing, well, then you are not going to be found for what you want to do next. So you have somehow got to build that in, but authentically. And so it needs to be a statement somewhere in your LinkedIn. This too, work with one of these fantastic individuals. They're often ex-search professionals, actually, who then just, concentrate on just that, because they've got the interview skills to work out what you're trying to do, even if you don't know it yourself. And then you can put that language into, and it's easier to put that language, I think, into your LinkedIn if it's not your own, and send it out there in the world. So have it declare what you want to do next if you are not already there. And why shouldn't that be the same for a senior person, if not even more so? Here I am with this extraordinary set of skills. I can demonstrate the way in which I have learned and mastered various areas of my career. I'm available to learn something else entirely, and make the declaration of whatever that is if you know. And people do that. People will say, I'm looking for this kind of role. That too, it's a difficult one, because it can't be too general, because it's going to come across, if you just say sort of looking for a purpose-driven organization, at the moment it sounds a little bit like bandwagon. So again, really spend some time thinking about it, be clear.
Yeah, excellent advice. So we've got, I think, about 10 minutes left on the clock. Is that right, Ashley? Brilliant. So we're starting to get questions rolling in from the audience, which is always loads of fun. Susan, I'd love to just kind of pepper you with a few of them, and maybe do a little bit of like lightning round, quick style, and we'll cover as many as we can. High level, so kind of picking up on the conversation we were having about the importance of a coach, finding a coach. How do you find a good coach as opposed to somebody that is really not worth it? How do you cut through and assess that before you spend all the money, right?
I wish I knew the answer to that. I really do. I'll let you know. Right. It's super hard. And then, you know what? There's merit. Maybe the point is, look at search firms that have got people who've got a coaching background, because, or maybe look at people in your profession who've gone and done coaching as well. Who's really curious about that? Who's doing that? I was just always fascinated with personal and professional development. What I was really fascinated by was, how do we help people? This is a leadership question, really, with sustained change. Invariably, I found that through training, we could get get people to move mountains in 24 hours, and then they would go straight back to who they were before we did the training. And I was super curious about, can we actually shift them forever? Should we even? I mean, there's an ethical.
Right.
Should I say to that person, you are so not suited, you're brilliant, but you should be an antique bookseller, or a yogi, or you should join the seminary,
Yeah. I would say yes. Sometimes people might need to hear that. It's incredibly liberating, right?
Yes.
No, completely hear you. Gosh, I would say with I'll take a turn at answering the coaching question myself. So I would say, if you're listening and you're part of a larger organization, or maybe an organization that's resourced with some sort of learning and development team, or perhaps access to a coaching network, I would say be quick to raise your hand, go to your manager and say, I'd really like to learn and grow. How can we work together so that I can tap into this coaching resource? I would love to try, right? And I think from the manager's hat, I love hearing stuff like that. It instantly makes me feel like, gosh, all right, this person really has that hustle. They're not stagnant. They're not wanting to stay status quo. They're wanting to grow. That's amazing. Let's fast track, right? Same for ourselves. Ask for what we need. Ask for what we want, right? Be one. Ask for referrals from friends. I totally agree with you on that. And I would also say a little bit of a different twist. If and when you do have a coach, if that coach that coaching process truly isn't resonating with you, if it's feeling like it's not the right fit authentically, right? Not coming from, set your ego aside, be open, right? But if there's something there, be okay with also firing your coach.
Absolutely.
There's nothing that says coach is up here, right? Coach is the coach should be your partner. And if it's not working, be quick, move on, find somebody that's going to be even better suited, and really own that. Because if you don't own your career and those who you surround yourself by, nobody else can do it for you, right? You can get help reflecting back, but you've got to do the work. And I'm hearing that from you, Susan, loud and clear.
Yeah.
Let's move on to one more quick question, and I'm mindful of time. We can probably get a couple more. Let's see, we covered the coaching bit. Susan, best advice, quick kind of upshot for those who might be wanting to make a move in the next 6 to 12 months. What should they be doing now to get ready to get themselves out there and find the right fit in that time period?
Well, I suppose best way to answer that would be to ask the questions I would be asking somebody if they phoned me to say, I want to move in the next 6 to 12 months, what should I do? I think the first thing I would be saying is, absolutely, you should be calling us. You should be calling anybody you respect who has got lots of exposure. Be on their radar for sure. So, we as an organization, and presumably most organizations do this, the smaller firms will do this more than the big firms, unfortunately. But, you might even think to even if you just call the smaller firms and can't get in front of the big firms, the smaller firms know the people at the big firms, they'll pass you on, they'll refer you. But so, for example, we meet our entire team. It doesn't matter whether I'm working on the search or not. We touch base 3 times a week on all of our searches, so that we're helping one another all the time. So we're listening to what each other is looking for, what the difficulties are that people are facing, so that if any of us has a candidate who's not right for our search, but sounds like they'd be a super fit for somebody else's, we can make sure that happens. And then we also try to we do try to actually be advisors to candidates as much as we are to clients. It's the clients who pay us, but our investment in, and we don't get to do as much as this as we would like. We could do this 100% of the time and love it, but that wouldn't serve anybody. So we're always feeling as if we're not answering people quickly enough, getting back to people quickly enough. But if you can get in front of us, then we put everyone's resumes together at the end of the week just to say, these are people who are looking. And the beauty of the corporate communications function is that you can do that, and you're not sort of everyone understands that you have to move sometimes to get other vertical experience or to grow. That you just it might even be that your manager would have said to you, listen, you're fantastic, and I haven't got an immediate promotion for you here, so you should look around. If you can't find something better, fantastic, but if you can, we support it. So make sure that they're not going to have anything for you most likely right then, but you just need, in the same way as we will phone people and say, have you got any ideas for this? I know they're not necessarily going to say, oh yes, I have 6 today, but rather they'll carry it with them. If I don't ask them, they won't think about it. And if then they meet somebody 2 weeks later, I'm so lucky if they say, oh my gosh, I was just talking to Susan and you need to call about this. And it's the same the other way around. If you call us, put your resume in front of us, we may sit there and say, oh, there was somebody who, but we'll get there. But you've got to do that with a few firms because we're all working for different clients and you want exposure to as many as you can. Right. And then, of course, there's your own networking. There's so much that would be, funnily enough, we have had situations where we're working with clients and I will phone to speak to other candidates and they'll say, oh yes, I have a friend who works there. I've heard it's fantastic. So yes, I'm very interested and I'd love to come over. And oh, we just lost 2 people to there. Yes, we'd like to come too. So I guess that's the thing is, network, but that's an obvious one. And then I suppose the only other thing to say is if you were thinking this and you do need to move to make the progress that you want to make in your career, yes, this is the time to do it. You have this unique opportunity. We talked in our list of questions about, is it a blip? Is this going to go away? I don't think it goes away really soon. I think that the correction that we're seeing for financial services, corporate communications in particular, is going to go on for a while. Okay.
Perfect end note. For those who are looking, we can strike while the iron's hot. So much fantastic wisdom from you, Susan. This has been such a fantastic conversation. Really appreciate it. With that, Ashley, I'll turn it back to you to help close us out.
Well, my goodness, I think everyone in the room is now thinking about their career trajectory and and really like reevaluating lives and our hiring and retention practices. So thank you both so much, Christina and Susan. It's been a great conversation. I feel like we could probably continue on for another hour or so, given the climate that we're in, but we will go ahead and close it up. Thank you both so very much. Everyone, thank you for joining our conversation today. Please do be sure to check out the Financial Narrative website. If you are not already a member, do apply for membership so that you keep hearing about these wonderful events. We will have much more coming up in 2022. So appreciate all of you and have a wonderful day. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.